Letter 3. To Mrs. Seville, England, July 7th, 17. My dear sister, I write in few lines in haste to say that I am safe, and well advanced in my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now in its homeward voyage from Archangel, more fortunate than I, who may not see my native land, perhaps, for many years. I am, however, in good spirits. My men are bold and apparently firm of purpose. Nor do the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us, indicating the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing, appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude, but it is the height of summer, and although not as warm as in England, the southern gales which blow speedily towards those shores, which I so ardently desire to attain, breathe a degree of renovating warmth which I had not expected. No incidents have hitherto befallen us that would make a figure in a letter. One or two stiff gales and the springing of a leak are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record, and I shall be well content if nothing worse happens to us during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured that for my own sake as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, persevering, and prudent. But success shall crown my endeavors. Wherefore not? Thus far I have gone, tracing a secure way over the pathless seas, the very stars themselves being witnesses and testimonies of my triumph. Which not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man? My swelling heart involuntarily pours itself out thus, but I must finish. Heaven bless my beloved sister. R.W. Letter 4. To Mrs. Seville, England, August 5th, 17. So strange an accident that happened to us that I cannot forbear record it, although it is very probable that you will see before these papers can come into your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in on the ship of all sides, scarcely leaving her the sea room in which she floated. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we were compassed round by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere and weather. About 2 o'clock, the mist cleared away, and we beheld, stretched out in every direction, vast and regular plains of ice, which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention and diverted our solitude from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sled and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north, at the distance of half a mile. A being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of a gigantic statue, sat in the sledge and guided the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler with our telescopes until he was lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundred miles from any land, but this apparition seemed to denote that it was not, in reality, so distant as we had supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we had observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea. Before night, the ice broke and freed our ship. We, however, lay to until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark those loose, large masses which float about after the breaking up of the ice. I profited of this time to rest for a few hours. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon deck and found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was, in fact, a sledge like that we had seen before, which had drifted toward us in the night on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive. There was a human being within it, whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not, as the other travelers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but a European. When I appeared on the deck, the master said, "Here is our captain, and he will not allow you to perish on the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board your vessel," said he, "will you have the kindness to inform me whither you are bound?" You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and to whom I should have supposed my vessel would have been a resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth the earth could afford. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery towards the North Pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied, and consented to come on board. Good God, Margaret! If you had seen the man who thus capitulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen, and his body dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. I never saw a man in so wretched a condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck and restored him to animation by rubbing him with brandy, forcing him to swallow by rubbing him with brandy. Oh. And forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him in blankets and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees, he recovered and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in this manner before he was able to speak, and I often feared that his sufferings had deprived him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him to my own cabin, and attended on him as much duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness, and even madness. But there are moments when, if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him, or does him the most trifling service, his whole countenance is lighted up, as it were with a beam of benevolence and sweetness that I never saw equalled. But he is generally melancholy and despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth as if impatient of the weight of woes that oppresses him. When my guest was a little recovered, I had a great trouble to keep off the men who wished to ask him 1,000 questions. But I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity, in a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depended upon their entire repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come so far upon the ice in so strange a vehicle. His countenance instantly assumed an aspect of the deepest gloom, and he replied, "To seek one who fled from me." "Did the man whom you pursue travel in the same fashion?" "Yes." "Then I fancy we have seen him, for the day before we picked you up we saw some dogs drawing a sledge with a man on it, across the ice." This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route, which the demon, as he called him, had pursued. Soon after, when he was alone with me, he said, "I have doubtless excited your curiosity, as well as that of these good people, but you are too considerate to make inquiries." "Certainly, it would indeed be very impertinent and inhuman of me to trouble you with any inquisitiveness of mine, and yet you have rescued me from a strange and perilous situation. You have benevolently restored me to life." Soon after this, he inquired if I thought that the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the other sledge. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken until near midnight, and the traveler might have arrived at a place of safety before that time. But of this I could not judge. From this time a new spirit of life animated the decaying frame of the stranger. He manifested the greatest eagerness to be upon deck to watch for the sledge which had before appeared, but I have persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. I have promised that someone should watch for him and give him instant notice if any new object should appear in sight. Such is my journal of what relates to the strange occurrence up to the present day. The stranger has gradually improved in health, but is very silent, and appears uneasy when everyone, except himself, enters his cabin. Yet his manners are so conciliating and gentle that the sailors are all interested in him, although they have had very little communication with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, being even now in a wreck so attractive and amiable.